Loma, California, was where the greater Los Angeles area met the desert, a place where the smog ended and the air cleared. In this region, the human population was doubling every year, steadily encroaching into a habitat where rattlesnakes had resided for millions of years. The two collided with dramatic results, marking this area as the front line, home to the Venom E.R.
Loma University Medical Center appeared like a typical hospital, but it was more than that. It was the center of a significant effort to combat the power of venom. Ralph Prado might have looked like a normal ER outpatient, but he was unique. A snake bite had pushed him near death, yet he still walked away. Fortunately, Loma was also the workplace of Dr. Sean Bush, the nation's foremost expert in snake bite treatment.
As a professor taking his knowledge to the front line, Sean was recognized at the highest level for his expertise. Many people loathe snakes, but to Ralph, they were fascinating. In this area, it was all too easy to bring a snake from the wild into one's house, though it was a risky idea. Ralph's story began on an important day for the Venom E.R team. The day he first met Sean, Ralph had entered a house only to discover a snake was out of its cage. As he began looking for it, he found it behind the sofa.
When he picked it up with his bare hands, the snake bit him. The rattlesnake held on for 15 seconds of pure agony, and no one had dealt with a bite quite like this one before. In the ambulance, a medic attended to Ralph, urging him to stay conscious, while the one behind the wheel inquired about his condition. All they could hear was Ralph grimacing in pain as they rushed him to the hospital, with the ambulance siren piercing the air. The ambulance sped toward the ER at Loma, and the crew suspected that the severity of the bite indicated it might have come from an exotic foreign snake. Ralph's body was being overwhelmed by the venom.
The Venom E.R team was called into action. Sean Bush's expertise was available 24 hours a day. He needed information on the bite and the snake from Dr. Dave Wrightley. Dave reported that Ralph was experiencing complications despite receiving an initial dose of crofab antivenin, including issues with bleeding and difficulties with intubation. The paramedics had tried to intubate Ralph in the field, but had some difficulty, so they had completed the procedure at the hospital. Ralph had to be restrained to prevent him from pulling out the tubes. Sean inquired about the number of crofab vials administered, and Dave confirmed that Ralph had received the initial 6 and was being given another 6.
At Ralph's bedside, Sean asked Ralph if the snake that bit him was a rattlesnake, to which Ralph nodded affirmatively. Sean sought confirmation that it was not an exotic species and asked again if Ralph was sure it was a rattlesnake. Ralph nodded again to assure Sean that it was indeed a rattlesnake that had bitten him.
Sean, while holding Ralph's hand, observed that he was oozing from the fang marks on his fingers and experiencing significant swelling up his arm. Sean also noted that Ralph was twitching all over and showing some fasciculations on his neck and legs. The legs were making worm-like movements under the skin. The awful truth dawned on Sean that this was the worst snake bite he had ever seen. He suggested they proceed aggressively with the antivenin, even expressing his readiness to mix the antivenin himself.
Sean Bush was at the center of a team of about 500 paramedics, pilots, scientists, and doctors. They confronted the problem, dealt with the dangers, and tried to understand the front line. They faced 6 different rattlesnake species, each bite being complex and unpredictable, requiring a unique response.
Mojave rattlesnakes had neurotoxins that attacked nerves, preventing breathing. Southern Pacific rattlesnake venom could rupture muscles and destroy the blood's clotting agents. Sidewinders, while supposedly less dangerous, could still incapacitate a 200-pound man. Diamondbacks lived within sight of the hospital itself. Sean needed to know when these snakes were likely to strike. To aid in this, Deputy Sheriff Mike Cadwell provided data on the Mojave rattlesnakes in the desert, while biologist Eric Duggan tried to predict future collisions as snakes and people competed for space. The field team made new discoveries every week, highlighting how little was known.
Throughout the summer snake bite season, emergency crews rushed victims to the ER in the shortest possible time. Part of the team at the Mojave Air Base, 90 miles north of the hospital, was Paul Romero, an international endurance athlete and paramedic. This huge endeavor had been created to confront a split-second event designed by nature to kill.
Ralph's body had become a battleground between the snake's venom and the E.R.'s antivenin. Sean needed both a positive identification of the snake and more antivenin. There was a real danger that Loma would run out. Dr. Bush first called the Tulsa Poison Control Center, explaining that he had a critically ill snake bite patient who was consuming all the available antivenin. He inquired about their supplies and expressed gratitude when informed they could borrow a few vials.
Finally, a deputy brought in the body of the snake that bit Ralph. A positive identification was vital for Sean's treatment plan, but the news was grim. Sean noted that the snake appeared even more dangerous than the Mojave rattlesnake. As a snake enthusiast, he disliked seeing a snake die and was amazed at the power of their venom.
He pointed out the effects of the neurotoxins at work on Ralph's eyes, causing both bleeding and swelling. While snake bites usually caused either neurotoxicity or bleeding and swelling, this one exhibited all symptoms, indicating a Southern Pacific rattlesnake. This reaction was exceptionally severe, and it posed a real threat to Ralph's life. The response to the venom was off the scale, yet every human victim had a different metabolism and reaction to the venom, making each bite unpredictable and unique, as venom exploited whatever weakness it encountered.
In the face of the situation, Sean had to decide how to save Ralph's life. At the hospital, he had state-of-the-art support, and the lab results indicated that Ralph's body was disintegrating. The venom was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Sean observed Ralph's CK levels fluctuating wildly on the computer. CK, a molecule inside muscle cells, leaked out into the bloodstream as muscle cells were destroyed and ruptured. This then flooded the kidneys, potentially clogging them. To prevent kidney failure and subsequent death, they had to keep large amounts of fluids going in to flush the kidneys. Sean noted that Ralph was being overwhelmed with CK, necessitating the administration of fluids to bring CK levels down. However, as more muscle destruction occurred, CK levels peaked again, requiring continued aggressive fluid treatment. Heavy bleeding was one of the common effects of Southern Pacific rattlesnake bites. Ralph's blood was not clotting properly because the venom was destroying the platelets, the very ingredient needed for clotting. Sean acknowledged that they were still struggling to normalize the platelets.
The plan involved administering more antivenin and transfusing platelets to mitigate the risk of spontaneous bleeding. Ralph was bleeding extensively, and the goal was to raise his platelet levels to a safer range to improve his condition. The treatment ramped up significantly. To effectively understand and treat snake bites, Sean's team needed to understand the snakes themselves. Tracking snakes in the wild was crucial to help Sean win the battles in the hospital.
On Animal Planet's Venom E.R, it was emphasized that Dr. Sean Bush needed to understand the snakes to save snake bite victims in Loma Venom E.R.
His medical training combined with the investigative skills of Deputy Chief Mike Cadwell, who tracked snake activity by planting tiny radio transmitters in wild snakes. His study area was an empty desert where human encroachment made knowledge about snake behavior vital for predicting when bites might occur.
Mike's passion for snakes spanned 40 years, having started as a biologist before becoming a cop. In the late 1960s, faced with limited job opportunities for biologists, Mike got involved in search and rescue and volunteered with the sheriff's department, spending the next 31 years as a deputy sheriff.
Despite his career change, he never lost his interest in venomous animals, particularly those that people often feared unreasonably.
Mike met Sean after the death of a local PE teacher, Rick Gabrielson, supposedly caused by a Mojave rattlesnake bite. Sean and Mike realized how little was known about these extraordinary creatures and were determined to learn more. Mike worked alone, armed with his knowledge and a cell phone for backup. He respected rather than feared the snakes and was always careful where he stepped. His hours of tracking had built a comprehensive record of snake life in the area. Close to the center of his study site, he used a little radio receiver to find the snakes and record data. The snakes that were part of his study had transmitters surgically implanted in their abdomens. Key to his work was an H-shaped antenna that received strong signals from the front, some from the back, and almost none from 90 degrees left or right.
By moving the antenna around, Mike could determine the direction to find the snake based on the signal strength. Each snake had a unique frequency. The signal strength indicated whether it was above or below ground and how active the beep rate was. The sandy desert was perfect for snakes, offering plenty of food, including small mammals and reptiles that dug burrows, which the snakes used for shelter from the sun's heat. Rattlesnakes were ambushers, using camouflage to become invisible to the eye, but Mike's radio revealed their locations. The radio revealed an alert snake, waiting and ready to strike in a split second. These snakes spent much of their time coiled, making them hard to see, and they would not usually move or rattle until someone almost touched them.
That was when accidents happened. However, Mike, protected by his years of knowledge, could walk across the desert safely. Snakes struck fast but had a range of under 3 feet, and outside that strike zone, Mike was perfectly safe. He spotted a Mojave rattlesnake coiled in a burrow.
During the summer snake season, Mike's job was to understand the behavior of the snakes in his group. Although Mojave venom was dangerous, the snake itself was small, less than 3 feet long and weighing just 10 ounces. Despite their reputation for attacking people, in the 1,200 encounters by Mike Cadwell's team, these snakes never showed any aggression. They usually stayed still, occasionally rattled or crawled away, and sometimes even crawled over to sniff the equipment or feet of the team members, but they never showed aggression.
It was hard to imagine an animal living an inch off the ground picking a fight with something 60 or 70 inches tall, which made it difficult to understand how they had acquired such a reputation. Mike's efforts aimed to build knowledge of snakes and ultimately helped Sean save snakebite victims. All of Sean's efforts were focused on Ralph Prado, who was in his 70th hour of intensive care. After a significant dose of antivenin and several transfusions, Ralph finally appeared stable enough for a trip to radiology for a CT scan of his brain.
Sean was concerned about Ralph's neurological state, as he had been under heavy sedation, making it difficult to assess his condition. The CT scan would help determine if Ralph was experiencing any brain bleeding, which would be catastrophic if present. Sean reviewed the CT images, which provided cross-sectional views of Ralph's brain. As he scanned through the images, he did not see any signs of blood, indicating that Ralph's brain was not bleeding. This was a positive sign, suggesting that Ralph might recover soon with continued treatment. Sean had administered to Ralph 5 times the normal dose of Crofab antivenin. Ralph was now off the critical list, but it would be a week before he could leave the intensive care ward. Sean informed Ralph that they would attempt to remove the tube that day, and Ralph nodded in response.
The region was home to thousands of snakes, but people were encroaching on snake territory. Loma received its latest snake bite victim as human and snake habitats collided. In Southern California, the desert was home to thousands of snakes, and as people began to move into the wilderness, new housing areas were being developed. At Silver Lakes, Edd Marshall and his crew were renovating a gas pipeline across the desert. It was early in the year, and a cold wind blew across the landscape as the snakes emerged from their winter dormancy, searching for prey, warmth, and shelter.
A moment's lapse in attention could be very dangerous, especially considering the low blood pressure that was a major concern. The absence of swelling around the bite site was an early indication that it was a neurotoxic Mojave rattlesnake bite. With flying conditions poor, it became a race against time.
Ed's blood pressure was dangerously low, necessitating his quick delivery to the emergency room. The flight took 30 minutes, and upon landing, the serious work could begin. Nurses were out on the path as soon as the helicopter rotor stopped, and the vital information was transferred from the flight crew to the ER team. Fortunately, the medics had been able to start Ed's treatment during the flight.
The ER was an alien territory for Edd, but a friend, Rich Davis, had rushed in to join him. Rich had received a phone call about Ed's snake bite while he was working up in Big Bear, and had come down immediately to find out what the doctors had to say. Rich explained that they lived in the desert where it got very hot, and during that time of year, snakes usually started coming out. It was really dry, and there had not been much rain, so the snakes were everywhere. Although they were not often seen, when they were, it was usually the Mojave greens.
Most of the time, snakes stayed away from people, but because they were working in a desert area, the heavy equipment, big trucks, and actual digging, which went 3 to 4 feet deep, could be causing the animals to come out of their burrows due to the vibrations. Mojave venom targets the nerves, and at that moment, it was searching for a weakness in Edd's body. The venom attacked his airway, and if it shut down, it would be like being strangled from the inside. Sean's team was getting the symptoms under control, and now it was a slow, careful process.
Edd was due for more time in the hospital, kept under constant surveillance as the antivenin did its work. After a night of treatment, the morning brought blessed relief. Edd looked much better and felt like going home. Sean advised Edd that he needed to drink a lot of water for the next few days because some of the contents from his muscle cells had leaked into his bloodstream. These were being flushed through thanks to the fluids Sean had given him the previous day, but they could clog up his kidneys and cause problems.
Sean was ready to prepare Edd's discharge papers after the current dose of antivenin was administered. Edd thanked Sean as they shook hands. In the battle between snake and human, it was a high-tech business covering 40,000 square miles of snake country. The helicopter crews who flew the desert danger zone were crucial. For the Mercy Air crew based at Mojave, rescues could be fast and furious.
Fitness was key, and the fittest among them was Paul Romero, an internationally renowned endurance athlete and flight paramedic. For Paul, this job was a perfect fit. When a call came in, the team scrambled into action. Paul described the work as an absolute blast and an extension of his adrenaline-fueled lifestyle. Being part of a flight crew and working with a team at Mercy Air, he found the role of a flight paramedic fascinating, with every day presenting something different without fail.
Operating from 10 different bases in the area, the helicopter crew flew directly to emergencies, providing the life-saving link between small hospitals and the Venom E.R in Loma. Paul and his crew flew 20,000 miles a year, handling every type of emergency that came their way.
Being based in the desert frontline, they were deep in snake bite territory. This was the dwelling of the Mojave Greens, which was serious and deadly business. For snake bite victims, the crew provided super-fast transport and were often the first in the chain of care.
Time was crucial for snake bite victims. Paul felt that his efforts in saving lives made the risks worthwhile and found the payoffs fascinating, valuing his work highly. When a patient arrived on the helipad at Loma, another team was ready for action. The helicopter crew handed off to Brandy Pavo, a registered nurse on the ER team. Brandy's role involved mixing and administering both pain medicine and antivenin.
Treatment could take several days, so the ER team worked long shifts to see their patients through the process or hand them over to the next stage. Brandy explained that when patients with snake bites arrived, they often came from the field or were transferred from other facilities. For those from the scenes, it took about half an hour, during which the team was already mixing the necessary drugs in anticipation of their arrival.
Snakes are definitely part of the scene here. Brandy explained that the reason she didn't go into the room where the snake was located was because she was busy with other patient care situations and directing traffic for ambulances. She had been in there before but tried to avoid live snakes whenever possible unless Dr. Bush was holding them. She preferred not to be within 10 feet of them. The team faced personal challenges throughout the summer, and Brandy would be training outside the ER, getting closer to those snakes.
Snakes were so widespread that even suburbs were now in snake territory. The team was involved in backyard rescues, and this time, Sergeant Paul Haver was at the controls with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Air Division. Sergeant Paul recalled that his first snake bite victim was in the Chino Hills area, a newly developed area with a lot of hills and new homes. When he was a child, a snake was found in the garage. The cop brought in a snake bite victim who happened to live near a golf course. The victim was picked up in an ambulance and driven to the helicopter. From there, it was a short flight from Chino Valley to Loma Linda University Medical Center.
It was a frightening experience for 4-year-old Nile Akhmed. He was in the garage and picked up the snake, not knowing what it was. A medic informed Sean about the incident. Nile's father killed the snake and brought it in to help with the diagnosis. The hospital lab swung into action, tracking the venom effects, and Sean calmed Nile enough to refine his treatment. The Crow Fab was beginning to work on the venom. Nile's home in Chino Hills was right on the snake frontline. The antivenin was starting to work, but Nile would be monitored throughout the night.
4-year-old snake bite victim Nile Akhmed had been treated overnight, and it was time for a progress report from Dr. Kim. Dr. Kim reported that Nile did all right, though the swelling had progressed a little, prompting an additional 2 vials of Crow Fab, which had since stabilized his condition. Sean informed Nile's parents that he anticipated a full recovery and was preparing to discharge him. Within 24 hours, Nile Akhmed was going home, but his story highlighted the increasing pressure on the team. People just didn't know enough about snakes to build houses right alongside their territory.
In Chino Hills State Park, biologist Eric Duggan was working on understanding what the snakes needed from their habitat. Dr. Bush, upon meeting Eric, mentioned the importance of wearing protective gear to prevent snake bites due to the tall mustard plants where snakes were hiding. Eric greeted Dr. Bush and Dr. Kim and mentioned that he had observed a couple of snakes on top of a nearby hill. He offered to locate them and provide a closer look. Dr. Bush responded positively, expressing interest in seeing the snakes.
Like Mike Cadwell, Eric utilized radio transmitters to track the movements of snakes and catch them for sampling. This region was prime snake country, teeming with Southern Pacific rattlesnakes, red diamonds, and offering an ideal habitat with abundant small rodents, plenty of sunshine, and minimal human presence, which made it a favorite environment for snakes. Dr. Bush noted the importance of understanding these snakes to save lives, though the work was just beginning. The current lack of data on snake needs, population changes, and potential encroachments into human areas meant that this conflict couldn't be effectively managed. Dr. Kim asked if a Southern Pacific rattlesnake was the species that bit Nile, to which Dr. Bush confirmed, pointing out that Nile's house was adjacent to the snake park.
Eric meticulously documented every snake, catching, examining, and then releasing them back into their territory to monitor their growth and movement. Eric informed the doctors that he had recaptured one of the males he had previously marked on the hillside. Dr. Kim inquired about the type of snake, and Eric identified it as a red diamond rattlesnake, explaining that he was conducting a recapture and mark study in addition to telemetry research. When asked about the snake's age, Eric estimated it to be older than 5 or 6 years based on its size. Dr. Kim then questioned if their diets were the same and how they coexisted so closely. Eric explained that his research aimed to understand their diets and whether there were any differences, which was one of the reasons he undertook this study due to the substantial numbers of both species in the area. After collecting his data, Eric released the snake back into its habitat. This data collection was a crucial step in understanding the snake frontline and in protecting children like Nile. The snake's home territory spanned a few hundred square yards but was just a mile away from the driveway where Nile was bitten.
Alongside the doctors, the local TV news team was present, as Nile's case had made it into the evening report. However, Dr. Bush was more concerned with the patient's well-being, remarking positively on Nile's appearance. A news reporter interviewed Nile's father, asking what he did when he realized his child had been bitten. Nile's father explained that he initially did not know Nile had been bitten and described how he held his son in the garage during the incident. Now, more stories were emerging from the frontline, with additional victims heading into the Venom E.R. One notable survivor was Ralph Prado, who had faced a severe battle against the venom. Despite never having seen firsthand what the venom did to his body, Ralph was determined to confront that reality. Sean showed him the recorded tape from his time in the ICU when he was first admitted. Ralph was visibly shocked by the sight of himself on the hospital bed. noting that he looked unrecognizable and had no memory of the ordeal. Dr. Bush explained that Ralph's condition was a direct result of a Southern Pacific rattlesnake bite, causing severe twitching for 5 days, which necessitated restraints to prevent self-injury. Ralph had received an unprecedented 58 vials of antivenin, as his symptoms persisted without improvement.
Ralph shared that subconsciously, he fought against the venom and refused to give up. Dr. Bush attributed Ralph's survival in part to his strong spirit and willpower, a testament to his resilience. Watching the disturbing footage was difficult, but Ralph had ultimately survived and recovered well, much to Dr. Bush's relief. As a keepsake, Dr. Bush had saved a rattle from the snake that bit Ralph, believing it might hold significance for him. Ralph expressed gratitude, acknowledging himself as a fighter but attributing his survival to Sean's efforts. He thanked Dr. Bush profoundly for saving his life, to which Sean humbly replied that it was his pleasure. Ralph expressed a hope never to meet Sean under such circumstances in the ER again. In Loma, being a fighter was crucial, given the venom's potent nature designed by evolution to exploit any weakness. Sean's team remained vigilant, always striving to stay one step ahead in the ongoing battle against venom.